The village of Otu lay nestled at the foot of the great Koba Mountains, where the soil was fertile and the air was always thick with the scent of mango and wildflowers. The people of Otu lived in harmony with nature, and their lives were dictated by the rhythms of the seasons, the moon, and the ancestral spirits that guarded the land. Every year at harvest time, the village would hold a great festival where songs and dances filled the air, and offerings of yam and palm wine were made to the spirits. But even within this tranquil setting, there were dark secrets buried deep within the hearts of those who lived there. Ephora's father, Chief Owenu, was not like the other men of the village. He had been a warlord in his youth, known for his strength and cunning, but the power he had gained came with a heavy price. The elders whispered that he had made a pact with the spirits of the land long ago, a pact that bound him to them in ways that no one understood. The chief had a deep knowledge of the ancient ways, the sacred rites that no one else dared practice. And though he had grown wealthy and influential, there was always a sense of foreboding surrounding him. It was said that when Ephora was born, the spirits had spoken to him. Chief Owino had told no one what they had said, but the villagers saw the change in him after her birth. His once radiant smile was replaced by a hollow stare, as though he carried a secret burden that weighed heavily on his soul. As a young girl, Ephra had been full of life. She would run through the fields with the other children, her laughter ringing out like the song of a bird. But as she grew older, she began to change. She became more beautiful, yes, but there was something else, something unsettling. There were whispers that the spirits had marked her for something greater than anyone could imagine. I remember the first time I truly noticed her beauty. It was during the festival of the new moon, a time when the village celebrated the end of the dry season. The women wore brightly colored beads, and the men donned their finest attire, their faces painted in elaborate patterns. The drums beat loudly, and the air was alive with the sound of chants. Ephora had been chosen as the chief's representative for the ceremony that year, and when she stepped into the center of the village square, the crowd fell silent. Her skin glowed under the firelight, and her hair, braided in intricate patterns, caught the wind in such a way that it looked like strands of silk. Her presence commanded attention, and every man in the square seemed to hold their breath as she danced, her movements graceful and fluid, like the wind itself. But even as the men admired her, they could sense that there was something beyond her beauty. It was as if she carried an aura of mystery, something unknowable. That night, many of the older women warned their daughters to be cautious around her, for they believed that Ephra's beauty was not a gift, but a curse passed down through generations of the chief's bloodline. They spoke of the stories of old, the tales of women whose beauty had driven men to madness, whose love had consumed them whole. But none of the young men in the village listened to these warnings. They were too entranced by her allure. He too had once admired Ephora from a distance. As a child, we had played together, running through the fields and laughing beneath the great baobab tree near the village edge. But as we grew older, our paths began to diverge. I became more focused on studying the ways of the elders, learning the herbs and rituals that had been passed down through the generations. I had a quiet life, content with the simplicity of village life. Ephora, however, began to draw the attention of the village's young men, and she became the subject of both admiration and envy. It was not long before Ephora began her yearly ritual, bringing a new man to her father's home each year. Each time, the same questions were asked, the same approval granted. It seemed like a harmless tradition, but over time, the men who entered her life began to change. They became quieter, more withdrawn. Some of them would speak of strange dreams, dreams of the spirits, of a dark figure watching them from the shadows. And then, just as quickly as they had entered her life, they were gone, their names fading from memory like whispers in the wind. I remember the first time I truly understood the nature of the curse that haunted Ephora. It was the year that Ahadi, the banker, had come to the village. He was different from the others. He wasn't simply captivated by her beauty. He seemed to see something deeper in her. I watched as he tried to speak with her in private, asking questions that no one had ever dared ask. He wanted to know about her father, about the traditions of the village, about the strange customs that seemed to surround her. That year, the village was in the midst of a drought. The rains had failed to come, and the crops had withered in the fields. The elders were worried, for a failed harvest meant that the village would not survive the coming months. It was during this time that Ahadi began to press Ephora for answers. He asked her more than once about the mysterious nature of her father's power. "What is it, Ephora? What does your father know that no one else does?" At first, Ephora had laughed, brushing him off as if he were being silly. "My father is a chief," she had said, "and he is wise, but he is not a god." But Ahadi was persistent. He spoke of the drought, of the villagers suffering. "There are things that the elders know," he told her, "things that they do not speak of. I believe your father's power has something to do with the land, with the spirits. We need to understand it." One night, as the full moon rose high in the sky, Ephra took Ahadi to the edge of the village, to a place where no one ever went. It was a clearing in the forest, a place that was said to be sacred, where the spirits of the ancestors watched over the land. "This is where the old ways are practiced," she said, her voice low and reverent. Hadi was uneasy. "What happens here?" he asked. Ephra's eyes darkened, and she looked away. "My father made a deal many years ago, a deal that bound our family to the spirits. He promised them something in exchange for power, for wealth. And now every year, a new man must be chosen to fulfill the pact." Ahadi's face went pale. "You mean?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The men I love are sacrificed to the spirits. They are taken in the night, their souls bound to the land." Ahadi took a step back, his heart racing. "But why? Why did you tell me?" "I never knew," she said softly, "until recently. It was only when I began to see the pattern, when I saw the men leave my life and never return. I realized then that my father had cursed me, that the love I offered was never truly mine to give." Ahadi stood there, speechless. He had come to love Ephra, but now he understood that their love was doomed from the start. He wanted to run, to leave the village and never look back. But something held him there. Perhaps it was his own love for her, or perhaps it was the need to stop the curse that had consumed her life. "I'll help you," he said finally. "We'll break the curse together." But the curse was not so easily broken. The following days were filled with tension as Ahadi tried to uncover more about the ritual. He spoke to the elders, though they would not speak to him directly. They would only whisper in their ancient tongue, warning him to leave well enough alone. But Ahadi's persistence led him to an old woman, Mama Yemi, who had been a healer in the village for as long as anyone could remember. She was the only one who seemed to know the full truth about Chief Oino's pact. Mama Yemi told him that the deal had been struck during a time of great war. Oino had been desperate to save his people from the ravages of conflict, and he had turned to the spirits for aid. In exchange for the spirits,